Warner Bros. Are in the mud! Zack Snyder's Justice League, like it or not, is one of the biggest movie stories in the modern day. If you don't know about the situation, you're either not that into movies or you were living under a rock. 3 years of campaigning online with the now infamous hashtag that finally led to a release, completely fueled by fan outcry for the true cut of this film. But if you don't know about the story, quick recap. Zack Snyder is filming Justice League when a family tragedy occurs. He then steps away from the project and Warner Bros. Brings in Joss Whedon, aka the guy who did the first two Avengers movies, and has since then seemingly been cancelled to finish the project. Almost the entirety of the film is reshot and seemingly becomes a studio-made film, void of any sort of vision, essentially tarnishing Snyder's original film and killing off any future films Snyder had planned. So then the so-called Justice League was released, and no one saw it, and those who did said,
"Holy Jesus, what is that? What the fuck is that?"
And I think before we get into the review, I should tell you what my stance on this film was. I didn't even see the 2017 film in theaters, and at this point, I wasn't overly invested in DCEU. And I didn't have the passion for Snyder's DC films that I do now. And when I heard about this original cut that supposedly exists, I thought, cool, whatever.
Okay.
And it seemed like this constant onslaught of Snyder fans spamming "release the Snyder Cut" would never stop. I never believed that Warner Bros. Would release it, and I didn't exactly respect or agree with the people in the movement. But now I feel almost bad for missing out on it, and I'm not going to miss out on this next one. So when they did announce that the film was coming, I thought,
impressive. Most impressive.
Okay, I'll watch it, but I wasn't that excited for it. Then the first trailer dropped. My opinion didn't change. Then I think I rewatched Man of Steel and BVS in preparation for this, and I realized, holy shit, these are really good. And then soon after, I think the second trailer dropped and it was fucking insane. My excitement skyrocketed and this became one of my most anticipated movies of the year. And as the days got closer, the teasers dropped, the character trailers, my expectations were absolutely sky high, and yet Snyder still managed to exceed them. And I don't know if this was before or after Zack Snyder revealed that his cut really does exist. Fans started campaigning online with the hashtag "release the Snyder Cut." Now, this went on for about 3 years until finally on May 20th, 2020, during a Man of Steel watch party, Zack Snyder along with Henry Cavill revealed that Zack Snyder's Justice League would be released in 2021. And here we are now, having seen the true cut of the film, and now there's another hashtag going around, but we'll touch on that later. This is the Justice League movie that we were meant to experience. Now, I am not a comic book guy by any means. By that I mean all of these characters, minus Batman, this shared universe is my first time experiencing them. Well, I watched a few seasons of The Flash, but that's it. So this review is coming from a fan of the movies, not so much the comics. And as a fan of some of the movies in the shared universe, my god, what an experience. In terms of the superhero genre, I haven't experienced the likes of something like this since Endgame. And it's not even remotely similar to that, because I don't think we've experienced something like this in general. I'll touch on where it sits in the superhero genre towards the end, but I think it's definitely cemented itself in the Hall of Fame of superhero movies. And the story behind this film makes the experience all that much more worth it. And although I wasn't quite part of the campaigning for this movie, I think every second of this film was worth it. All 4 hours of it. And I want to make this video solely about Zack Snyder's film, so I'll touch on the 2017 film just this one last time. Zack's film makes the 17 version and everyone involved in making whatever that was the biggest joke of all time. The words to describe just how much better this true version is simply do not exist. The two films are like night and day in almost every single way apart from story, which is essentially the same, except there's more and it's better in Zack's film. Now, let's leave this shit and never touch on it again. Well, maybe in a ranking video, but no more.
Dostoevsky.
To call Zack Snyder's Justice League an event film feels like an understatement. The biggest streaming release of all time, the final product fans have been asking for 3 years or so, to finally be released, it feels like a monumental achievement fueled by fans, because without them, this never would have released. Of course, it's Zack Snyder's film, but it was never his decision to make. And now that it finally has released, and I've seen it, it feels a little weird. And I guess it's like that with every big film that you anticipate, that you're so used to looking forward to it, and then you finally do see it, it's like, what now? I had the same feeling with films like Tenet, Infinity War, Endgame, and now I guess I'm still trying to comprehend that this movie was actually released. But to talk about the actual movie, I think this is more than any Snyder fans could have asked for. It is truly his magnum opus, if you will, and although I haven't seen all of Snyder's films, but I will be in May, surely this has to be the best one, because pretty much everyone I know that liked or loved BVS has loved this even more. And even people who hated BVS absolutely loved this movie. And as for myself, well, I really enjoyed Man of Steel and I loved BVS, and this was beyond anything I could have imagined. And that is not an exaggeration by any means. As I was waiting to watch this movie, I was literally jumping up and down. I'm 18 years old and I was literally jumping up and down from excitement like I'm Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins. I don't think I've ever done that before, and it still exceeded my expectations. With a filmmaker like Zack Snyder and his style, I think you either love it or hate it. And by that I mean the technical aspects, like the slow-mo, the color grading. Personally, I love it, and he has become one of my favorite directors with this trilogy of DC films. The colors give it the dark and gritty feeling that fits this movie and tone perfectly, and all of the action is incredible. The entire bank sequence with Wonder Woman, it reminds me a little of the Man of Steel action, and that one scene alone is better than either of the Wonder Woman films. Every action sequence is simply lovely. Simply lovely. There's too many to describe, but all live up to the previous one, and the climax of the film is a thing of beauty that never seems to let up. And as for the slow-mo, who doesn't love a bit of slow-mo? Well, apparently a lot of people don't, but I'm not one of them. And people are saying that the CGI is clunky in some places. Personally, I didn't notice it. If I go back, I probably would. And Steppenwolf especially. He might be the biggest improvement in this film in comparison to the 17 film. And he serves as a great complement to Darkseid. He's introduced to us as this spiky boy who seems to be just unstoppable, and yet we see him bowing to Darkseid and acting like a stooge essentially. That even though there's this really big strong guy that they have to fight, he's nothing compared to the actual big one. God damn, I want to see those other two movies. This film will leave you asking for so much more. And in terms of the other characters, the way Snyder understands them and presents them is just unreal. Again, not a comic books guy, but I love how he puts these characters to screen. And some people say that all of these guys should have had their solo movies before Justice League. To that I say, why? There's really no need, because at that point you're just copying Marvel. Sure, it worked for them, doesn't mean it can't work in a different way for DC, because Snyder is able to introduce Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg in these movies perfectly without necessarily giving them all in-depth origin stories in their own movies. And the way he does handle them shows just how much he cares about them, and when you watch it on screen, you see that. And Snyder said himself that Cyborg is the heart of this movie. He could not be more right. I know nothing about this character, and through one amazing scene, he told me everything I needed to know about him. But if he's going to do things like this, that's just going to lead to accelerated inflation. And he has this great arc throughout the movie where he comes to accept who he is, and it's great to see. But as great as he was, it was Barry Allen that was actually my favorite character in this. And maybe that's because I've always had a liking towards speedsters in superhero films. Actually, that's very much the reason why he was my favorite character in this, but more on him in the spoiler section. Not to say that those two are the only great characters in this movie, because although Batman and Wonder Woman do get shunted to the side a little in terms of character, they all get their moments to shine. Superman included, and his return is truly an amazing moment, and to hear that flight theme once more is just so good. Not to mention Jeremy Irons as Alfred, who finally gets the screen time he deserves post BVS. I think a big red flag for people when they hear about this movie is that it's 4 hours long. Let me tell you, it does not feel like 4 hours. It doesn't feel longer, it doesn't feel shorter, it feels just right. It feels like for 4 hours you are transported into this world to experience this monumental, epic journey of a film, and that's why in the thumbnail of this video I've put more than a film, because it feels like that. Not only because it is a testament to fan dedication in seeing this version of the movie, but because when I watched it, it felt like I had experienced something I hadn't before with a film. And there isn't even one word for me to use to describe this so-called movie. I was lost for words after finishing it, and every second of it was justified. There is nothing I can think of that should have been cut out. The unsung hero of this film has to be Tom Hulkenberg, aka Junkie XL, because he delivered a score that is as memorable as it is epic. The main theme that is used throughout is so intense and thrilling, the way he adapts the rest of the themes to fit the style of it, the speed of force, and he's doing Godzilla vs. Kong, which only makes me more excited for that movie than I already am. Him and Zack Snyder complement each other's work so well, just like Hans Zimmer and Nolan. Their styles are so similar in the sense of them being loud and in your face without any subtlety that they mesh together perfectly. Now, before wrapping up in the conclusion, I do want to touch on some spoilers, because although it's essentially the same story, there are some things that I and many others would consider spoilers, so skip to here if you wish to avoid spoilers. So there's really only one thing I want to talk about here, and that's this scene. This scene is the coolest fucking thing I have seen in a comic book movie. Now, I may sound like a child.
Let me think. Oh, I don't care.
But when it comes to these comic book movies, I think a lot of us turn into a child when it comes to seeing things like this, because Barry Allen running faster than the speed of light to turn back time, which he accidentally did earlier in the movie, to save everyone, left me in absolute awe. The way the Speed Force is presented here, the score, the lightning, the score, the way the literal cosmos open up behind Barry as he rewinds time, I can't stop rewatching it. And when it really kicks in and he starts running and the world starts reforming around him, that is one of the coolest things I've seen in a movie. One of the best scenes in any comic book movie. If there were a Hall of Fame for comic book movie scenes, this one is definitely in there. And the way he comes in clutch to save the day is what makes him my favorite character in this movie. Up to this point, him and Cyborg were really close for me, but my liking for his powers played a fairly large factor in the end. And it's this scene in particular that leaves me scratching my head on how the people at Warner Bros. Thought it wouldn't be a good thing to release this version of the film. It's just so absurd to me how we almost didn't see this scene play out. And as for this scene, I mean, Joker stole the scene, let's be honest. It's another one of those love it or hate it moments in the film, and personally I loved it. But I will admit that it did feel forced, but now I really want to see this nightmare world explored, whatever it takes. Now, I could sit here and tell you how not all of the dialogue is exactly amazing, or how the epilogue feels too stretched out, or how not all of the acting is exactly great. And how some of the song choices seem off, and how there is sometimes a little too much exposition. And theoretically, that should bring my score down, but that's not the type of critic I have made myself out to be. I go off pure gut feeling, especially when it comes to movies like this. And if you haven't realized my score for this by now, I think it goes without saying that I couldn't not give this movie a 10 out of 10. And whenever I give a movie a 10 out of 10, it means my gut told me to. There's this inner feeling that this movie is a 10, and such is exactly the case with Zack Snyder's Justice League. And the more I think about it, the more I love it, and to see so many other people love it as much as I do is so awesome to see. I don't remember the last time something came out and so many people loved it that much. I guess Endgame, but that was like a while ago. May or may not be working on a video about those two Avengers films. And that is the obvious comparison, really. Had this movie come out before Infinity War and Endgame like it was meant to, who knows what comparisons we'd make. But really, we shouldn't be making them, because they are completely different films, both in tone, characters, and what they mean. Infinity War and Endgame work because there are 20 movies that have come before them, and Zack Snyder's Justice League works because it tells its own story so well, and it has the time to do so because of the runtime. And that's where I'll leave that comparison. That was a lot to unpack. But I think I covered mostly everything on how I feel about this movie. And I think this might become a yearly rewatch for me on March 18th to be specific. Like a sort of celebration of this incredible film and its story of how it came to be released. Because it's oh so beautiful.
You are so beautiful.
And a small touch of For Autumn at the end. I'm not the most emotional guy out there, but that did hit me a little. And I didn't even know this, but Autumn's favorite song was Hallelujah, and that just adds a whole lot of new weight to both the first trailer and the credits. What a film, what a director, what a triumph. And I'd never thought I'd be the one to join the hashtag Snyder cause, but I don't see how I can't. Hashtag restore the Snyderverse. But why is Mara suddenly British?